Welcome to the Webinar Talk Show. I'm Liz Green.
And I am Tom Singer, and we are so pleased that we have gone into this second season of the Webinar Talk Show with the theme of Don't Cancel Your Event. Because whether it's a corporation or an association, the people you serve need you now more than ever.
Absolutely, which is exactly what we're going to talk about with our guest today. And Tom, you and I had the pleasure of working with Ceré in the past.
I agree. I was on a committee and for the National Speakers Association when she worked there, and every single time I was around her, always so impressed.
Absolutely. And extremely talented event professional, but also just an energy that doesn't stop. So,
and she's cool.
And she's wickedly cool. Our guest today is an event professional, but what she really does is design experiences for members to really bring people together. And whether that's in person or virtual, certainly virtual right now, she has some great ideas. We've seen it in action, which is fun. And we are so excited to have Ceré Netters here with us. Welcome to the Webinar Talk Show.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's been a while since I've talked to you both. I'm so happy to be here.
Great to see you.
We miss you. We miss you for sure. So tell us a little bit about WorldatWork, where the organization you're working for right now.
Yeah, so WorldatWork is a total rewards association. What that means is we're really a subset of HR. We don't focus on all of HR as a whole. That's what SHRM really does, and we're a slight competitor of SHRM's. We focus on total rewards as a whole. So we're looking at pay, compensation, benefits, well-being in the office, and bringing your entire self to your job and your experience. Pay equity, pay fairness, just everything that focuses on an employee as a whole, rather than just what they do for their job and their job descriptions and their job titles and things like that.
Well, and one of the things that we were talking about before we started this, before we got on air, was the focus that you have right now. Because events aren't really like splashy, here it is. There's always a purpose to events. What is your focus right now in determining what those experiences you're going to design right now?
Yeah, so I would say probably one of the biggest ones is how to get in front of our members at just the right time. I think, again, our members are a subset of HR, and we do have some of the HR generalists, but they're the people within organizations that serve the people. So, as the world keeps changing with the pandemic and with politics and with culture and everything else, they're having to be just as agile and upfront about things and try to be as transparent as possible. And that's where we come in, because we're educating them and also bringing them together to connect them so that they feel like they have a tribe and kind of a place that understands them. Because the hospitality and events industry has been really hit. I can't imagine how people from the HR side are feeling, having to have furloughed or let people go, knowing that they're going into a world that doesn't really have a place for them right now. So we're always trying to see how we can get in front of them, how we can help bring them together and give them educational opportunities and connection opportunities with not only each other, but with also service providers, because there are a lot of new technologies popping up and they may not have the same avenues to find out about them, just like you would go to an in-person event and you can go to a trade show or, have client dinners and stuff. That's all stopped right now. So how do you get to these people?
So Ceré, you mentioned in sort of your initial explanation of what WorldatWork does, you talked about focusing a little bit on the well-being at work that people have. So both looking at what you do for your members, but also then what your members do for their employees. How do events, be them virtual in the current case that we're in, how does bringing people together for some sort of a virtual event, how does that help with well-being?
I want to say the human touch without the touch part, so no pun intended. But it's about feeling like you're not alone and kind of isolated right now, and knowing that the circumstances that you're experiencing, other people are also experiencing. And there's, you know, camaraderie and misery sometimes, and understanding that, you know, me as an event professional speaking with another event professional and being able to bounce ideas off of each other, even though what we're going through is not a positive time at the time, you know, so I can see how that translates over to many industries, not even just, you know, the HR and the total rewards industry. So understanding how to gain new skills, how to translate, you know, old skills and, you know, get some skill refinement, because I think there's a lot of things that have happened where people just don't know how to handle it, and they don't know where to get the education, or, you know, overnight you're needed to be able to do X, Y, and Z, and you've never done it before because, you know, there was a whole nother position for it and now that person's not there. So how do you get there, and who do you talk to about it? um, and so for planning the experiences virtual as they are right now, being able to offer that space and not just fill everything up with content, but try to give people that time to actually talk and connect with each other. And, you know, try to incorporate some icebreakers as you can, because, you know, you're still talking to people on a screen that you've never met before, or maybe have met once, or they might be an executive or their title might be a little intimidating. So how do you create that camaraderie on camera, so that when they are able to come back together, it's like, this is my family. They understand me. I have a place.
I like the idea of having a place. Because a lot of the time when we're thinking about events pre-COVID, it's where are we going, right? That destination is part of the experience, but creating a place virtually makes a lot of sense. So how do you do that?
There's a lot of tactics. I wouldn't say there's a perfect way, and I think that's one thing as planners we're always trying to struggle with, because I think people are, you know, zoomed out at this point. You know, we're in front of our computers and our cameras more than we used to be. You know, I think that companies are trying to be as flexible as possible with the work-life balance, because we're at home, but we're probably working more now than we ever have in the past, because you can easily get on and check an email, you know, at 7 o'clock at night, and wake up at 5 a.m. and get some work done before everyone else gets online. So we've tried to, within all of our programming that we've offered so far, try to host some moderated roundtables, select some topics that either a sponsor has selected, or, you know, area of interest, or do some crowdsourcing when we're able to kind of see what our attendees want to talk about, because, you know, we're definitely experts within the field, but they're the ones going through it right now. So there might be something overnight that they're like, hey, this happened, I want to talk about it. So let's allow that space for them to talk about it, and not try to control the conversation too much, and just be more there as a moderator, facilitator role, and just be there to kind of help push the conversation along. But virtually, I would say those moderated roundtables, you know, similar to everyone else, we're doing happy hours and things like that. But internally as an organization, I have the pleasure of co-chairing our diversity, equity, inclusion committee right now. So that's fun. And we're actually working as a committee to help bring some interesting experiences to our company that we also want to display for our members, to see how we are doing as an organization, but also allow them to, you know, borrow, cheat, and steal some ideas that they can incorporate with their own companies. So, you know, we have Diversity Month coming up next month that we celebrate and recognize as Diversity Month. And we have some really cool virtual ideas coming from around that.
So it's interesting because you talked about people being, you know, I think you used the term zoomed out. I hear a lot of people throw
Mhm.
around the term Zoom fatigue.
Zombies.
So as yeah, as a person who is in charge of putting on these experiences, these events for a large association, have you found a happy medium to how much is too much that you're offering your members, and maybe how much is not enough?
Yeah, so one thing that I've seen a lot happening in the industry, and there's just so many different ways you could do it, right? I've seen events, virtual events or seminars or whatever, that take place all day. And there's been events that are almost overnight, because you're servicing and having to keep in mind your international partners and members. And so you see 14, 16-hour virtual events, and then you see the 1 hour webinars or the 30-minute webinars, or, you know, those things. So with our virtual conferences. We've kind of stayed within that sweet spot of no longer than 3.5 hours. We usually start at least on East Coast time because the rest of the country can kind of follow. But when cross the seas, it's not super late for them. You're looking into early to late afternoon, evening. So
Mhm.
nothing more later than like 7 p.m. And, we obviously can't touch everyone. So we know that it's going to be 3 a.m. for somebody, but we also do make sure all of our stuff is available on demand as much as possible, unless the speaker says otherwise. So I think for me personally, I don't want to sit in front of a computer for more than a couple of hours. I think even just working, you have to make time to get up and stretch and find something else to do. So I personally don't love the idea of 5-6 hour virtual conferences. You're losing your audience. You might have people chiming in and out just based on what sessions they want to attend or what activities they want to be a part of. But I prefer to try to get them and get that experience all together, and have them there for that moment as much as possible, and then allow them to go back, and take part of their day and get everything else done, rather than, you have their attention here and then they're over here looking at their computer and working and then back. And, it just seems like a lot. So I personally find that no more than 3.5 hours with breaks in between, for sure, 15-20 minute breaks, is kind of our sweet spot.
I like that idea. I've been involved in both, and the long ones from the back end of the experience, that is a long to maintain energy and interest, as if you're going to MC a 7-hour day or an 8-hour day, that's a long day. I'm not saying we wouldn't do it.
Oh, we would do it, but it is a long experience. I did a 3-day event that was 6 hours a day, and I realized I've done that live in many associations, but sitting here in my little corner in my office for 6 hours a day, and as the master of ceremonies, I have to be there paying attention to everything, because if a speaker's Wi-Fi drops, I have to come in and fill in until they return. Whereas at a live event, once the speaker hits the stage, they're never going to vanish into thin air, I guess, unless they're a magician, and then they'll come back. But, it's one of those things that it's a long day to be the host. And I don't see how people pay attention for 6 hours a day for 3 days to get their information that way. So I agree with you.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. Now, we were talking before we got on the air about sort of the 3 seasons of COVID so far, where early in COVID, everybody in the meetings industry was like, people are canceling, people are postponing, we don't know what to do. And then it was like summer comes along, and we got used to this virtual environment, and some things happened, other things were being planned. And I think we were all hopeful that in person was going to come back. And now we're in the fall, and it's very clear that it's going to be a little while before we're back in person again. Our theme for this season is Don't Cancel Your Event. What advice do you have for someone that maybe had a in-person event planned for December, January, and February? Now we're thinking, I'm going to need to rethink that. What advice would you have for them?
Don't try to replace your in-person event with a virtual event. They're very different. You're never going to get that full experience. In-person events are never going to be replaced. They're going to come back at some point in time. And I think even now, people are itching to be together. I mean, that's why we have people that are kind of going rogue and doing things and not listening to guidelines. But I think sometimes planners or people that are having some planning capacity right now are so interested and eager to try to say, well, we had an exhibit hall and we had all these sessions and we had all this. How do we do that virtually? It doesn't need to be done that way. And there's a lot of opportunities. And I think, yes, there's ways to have virtual networking, but look at the goals and objectives of your event. And does it need to be the same event? Do you maybe transition it, call it something new, and maybe you have a new product that you can push and have some new exciting components to it virtually, rather than just putting on what was supposed to be in person and then you transitioned it. I think, to Tom's point earlier, and, referencing what's too much, especially with annual events, you're having 50, 60, 70, 80 plus sessions. You don't need to do that virtually. Even if you bring thousands of people, that's just a lot of options for a 3-day virtual event or anything, longer than that. So don't try to duplicate what you would do in person. Um, I'd also say, consider if you're trying to do anything in person, maybe regional. Look at small groups. Definitely do more of the invite only rather than just open registration, because then people feel more exclusive. You can do things to have them create that network before they get there in person if you're talking 20, 30 people. And you can use free platforms. You don't always have to purchase a platform to do things. Take advantage of LinkedIn and Facebook and Zoom meetings and go-to meetings and webinars and things like that, to have people, just come in for 15 minutes a day, have some topics, allow them to introduce themselves, so that if you are trying to host something small and regional, that it's not completely foreign once they get there, because you still have to keep in mind of social distancing, or in this case, physical distancing is what the industry is trying to change it as. We're still going to be social, we're just physically apart. So doing things like that, and then, take into consideration everyone's needs, maybe survey your members, get a small committee going, do a focus group, maybe take some of your championship members or clients or customers, people that have always been there for you and, that you can trust with feedback and some honest opinions, and say, what do you need from us? How can we best serve you? How can we help you? And you have to be willing and open to hear that honest feedback, because you might not have a place right now. It might not be that you're not relevant. Maybe it's just not you're relevant for what they're going through. So you just have to be willing to pivot, Liz, as we kept saying, pivot quickly. But also don't do what's best just for the company. Do what's best for your members and your clients.
So that brings up an interesting point when you talk about this whole idea of physical distancing. One of the things I've talked about from the beginning of this in the speeches that I've been able to do is I talk about how do we socially tighten while we're physically
I
distancing.
love that.
And this whole idea of social tightening, because there's so many people who feel isolated. The studies are coming out that people are feeling lonelier. There was already an epidemic of loneliness, and now people are feeling lonelier than ever. So what has your organization done to help your members socially tighten? And do you have any stories of where it's worked, where people have maybe made some new contacts they didn't have before?
Yeah, so we did run 2, for the first time ever, virtual events this past summer. So that was fun. And, my mentioning of don't just replace what you've done. So we actually had our annual conference scheduled for June in Minneapolis. And we decided to cancel it. But instead of just replacing it or duplicating it for virtual, we actually just cut it, and we launched entire new virtual events that still played on the name of our event, but it wasn't in the same capacity of our in-person event. And then we also ran another one that was happening at the same time in August, that was for sales compensation professionals. And usually that event has been maxed out due to the venue that we've used in the past, but we got, almost double the amount of attendees, because it's a very niche audience. Almost double the amount of attendees that were able to join internationally as well. And that was we heard 2 things in that. The first thing that we heard is, we're so sad, we can't wait to see each other in person next year. So that made me super excited that even in August at that time, people are like, we're going to be together. We need to be together. And I don't know if it's sales professionals, because I think they're a little bit more risque than others, because they're willing to do things. But that was the first thing we heard. And then the second thing we heard was that they were excited that we were able to offer something virtually. And we had a lot of international attendees that have never attended the event in person. So it was really cool to see. We had, some virtual networking lounges, and we had strategic planning around having staff go in there and ask questions and engage. Our CEO was in there asking questions, engaging. And it wasn't even just, tied to the industry. It was tied to, like, what kind of dog do you have? And do you sit at your table, or do you have an at home office? Like, do you wear blazers, or are you in t-shirts? Like, asking personal questions that were a little bit more fun to just see what everyone is doing. And so that was a way to kind of bring people together. And we saw that reflected in our survey results, that they were pretty excited. At least the platform we were using, people were able to connect one-on-one and, share profiles and connect offline. And so we saw a lot of that happening, a lot of LinkedIn connections. So I would say that with our virtual events, and then we're also offering a slew of webinars and all kinds of other things that we kind of normally did, but I think even more so now. And I would say for us right now, as much as we've tried to bring in new aspects to bring people together, I think a lot of companies, and us included, are still reactionary right now, because things just keep changing. And it's every time we think we get caught up and we have a little bit of ground, it changes again. So I think we're maintaining what's going on this year, but we're planning for 2021, and we've been planning for 2021 as things keep changing. So that's where we're trying to incorporate, how do we bring people together virtually in a different way that isn't what everyone else is doing? Because I think that there's just so much virtual content out there right now. It's, it's not now there's not that, where do I get it from? It's, do I want to be a part of it? Can I watch it later? There's just so much going on, and, you have families and you have jobs, and you're just having to deal with your own mental health and, physical health. And it's just a lot to come at you all the time. So we're trying to think of, how do we deliver different experiences that aren't the same of what everyone else is doing, one, to make us stand out, but also to make it a little bit more engaging so that people do actually want to attend live.
Yeah, that is so key and important, because one of the things that we've seen is there's just a lot of talking heads over PowerPoint out there living as sort of a webinar or as a keynote or whatever. And when you can make it different, when you can shake it up, that's where we think you stand out. And Eliz and I have tried to do that with this whole interview format that we bring to it, because I think that experts are great, but you can only listen to that talking head for so long. Whereas if you can get people to kind of be a little bit more serendipitous in an interview, I think that stands out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what's important, is trying to create those surprise moments that you can deliver virtually, so that it's not the same. I recently got my virtual, gosh, what's the title? It's so long. Virtual Event and Meeting Management Certification.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Super timely. I don't know why I got that. And so that was one of the things that we learned in that course, which I recommend anyone go take. It's very cool. It's very engaging, and you learn a lot. And, the class is like 300 people for 6 weeks. So you meet a lot of people.
Eliz and I both have the speaker version of that, which is the
yes. Yeah. So
the
there's
virtual
just
speaking. What is it? The virtual.
Is it a long title?
Presenter.
Yeah. That's, well, congratulations on that.
Yeah. No, it's
and side note, those really do help, because as an event professional, that's one thing that we're learning really quickly, is that presenters and speakers and MCs and masters of ceremonies can do it on stage. It does not always translate well virtually, and we've experienced some of that. Now we're like, okay, we need to have a different kind of interview process before we just select you, because you can submit a great CFP or a great video of you in person. It's not the same. So I appreciate both of you getting that certification, because it kind of helps weed people out in the most positive way. But, it does help weed and show who has the qualifications. So, yeah.
This, what Tom and I do, we used to do sitting next to each other. So we would do the virtual part, the at-home part of a hybrid event, right? Or sometimes, we could do both in person if there's two of us, and virtual. But, we used to sit next to each other.
It's a lot easier to communicate when you can see their body language sort of out of that peripheral side of your eye than it is when you're staring into a camera.
Yeah.
So
different skills.
It is a different skill, and it takes practice. So yeah, you're right. It's not like, if you could do it in person, you're not necessarily going to be able to pull it off in virtual. But we're all learning along the way.
Yeah.
That's what makes it fun. The thing that is really sticking to my head is the idea that you're creating something new. You're not taking what you planned in person and plopping it over here on Zoom and just saying, here you go. You're creating something new. And we've had other people on the on the show who have talked about letting go of things that maybe don't fit, or maybe it was something that you're like, we spend a lot of time and money on this and it's not really impactful, but everybody loves it, so we have to keep doing it. Or there's a certain contingency of people who love it and we have to keep doing it. But now in the virtual, maybe that goes over here. And we, when we're back in person, I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
Is that something that you predict, that the way we do in-person events, when hopefully we're all back very soon in person, is this experience going to change what those experiences are like?
I think so, yes. I think even though we're going through a pandemic, I think the silver lining in all of this is that it's forced the entire industry and the world to shift and shift quickly. And we have to rethink how we've done things, because I think we all got really complacent in just how we always run events and,
Right.
bringing in the fun new experiences. But it's, there's content, there's a speaker, they're on stage, they're talking, you have an audience, they walk away, and that's pretty much it. And I think right now,
Cookies at 2 o'clock.
yes,
I
cookies at
hope
2 o'clock
I hope
and
cookies
wine
at
at
2 o'clock.
6.
I hope cookies at 2 o'clock stay.
And
We can give out some cookies as long as the wine stays. That's the biggest piece. And you can have wine all day now. But really, this is the time now to experiment.
Mhm.
We've always had that it has to be done this way because it's always been done this way and it's been successful. So why change it? And we're nervous. And are people going to respond? Are people going to pay? Are they going to show up? Are we going to get sponsors? Are we going to have positive feedback in the engagement? There's so many things that go into thinking about it, that that's the one benefit with virtual events, is that you really should just be condensing a lot of the things and not expanding it into a really long day and a lot of offerings. I think they have their place, but not on a regular basis. And this is the time. Does this make sense? If we take it away, we replace it with something else, we bring in a new opportunity, or we just don't have it, how does our audience react? And I think the one thing that the world is going to have to get used to is that, especially for 2021, hopefully being more of a recovery year, in-person events are just not going to be the same. We're not going to see that bounce back to where it was, before February of this year for a couple of years, maybe, as we're kind of working through herd immunity and vaccines and cures and all this other stuff. And just, people actually being comfortable being next to each other. We're basically creating this complex that, oh gosh, you're going to be too close, even if it is safe to do so.
Right.
It's going to
So-
take a while to come back from that.
Follow-up question on this. What do you think is the future of hybrid events?
Mm-hmm.
I think that they're always going to be there. I think there's going to be a component for it, especially with our international friends. I'd be interested to see how the in-person bounces back and how quickly it does, to see if there's that real need for hosting as much virtual content as you do have in person. I think that, a virtual experience, you can't charge the same as an in-person event, even though I'm seeing some companies do it. I totally don't understand it, but they have their reasons. And you might have it scaled down because they don't need all the same stuff that the people need in person. And that's what they're there for, is the experience and the human connection. And you can't bring that virtually. But with hybrid events, for 2021, I see them still having their place. I don't think that they're going to go away ever completely, because you service a different audience. But, as a lot of venues, in-person venues, have closed down, and now we need a lot of space for 15 people, how is that going to translate on site once we can have 2, 3, 4, 500 people in person again? I think the biggest thing is that budgets are going to be cut for a while. So that's going to be one of the major reasons that hybrid events will stay around until the economy can really recover enough. Because in a crisis, or if a company's not doing well, the first thing that gets cut is travel budgets.
Yep.
And professional development training and things like that. So finding that balance of what's free, what's not, what's the price point, do your price analysis and your competitive analysis, and looking at your landscape to see what really works and what's attractive. But I do think at some point that hybrid events will still be here. I just don't think the virtual side will be as attractive as is during a pandemic, because people are itching to, I think people miss the tchotchkes and the hallway conversations and the high fives and, the crazy guy walking around in a crazy suit and just, pointing and everyone talking about it and things like that. You just don't get that virtually. So I think that we'll see. I think 2023 will be pretty telling. I can't speak too much for 2022 because we don't know how 2021 is going to go, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I'm not even that much of a hugger, and I want to get
Mhm.
back to going to conferences and hugging my friends.
You're just going to hug
I'm just gonna
everyone.
hug everybody for like 6 months, and then I will go back to not being much
Yeah,
of a
then
hugger.
don't touch me.
Yeah.
The one thing I've seen that's pretty cool, and we're planning to incorporate it for our annual, given the fact that we can actually host it next year, is the wristbands or some type of identification on the badges that indicate how comfortable people are with touching. And you're really just using that stoplight system. So red, I don't want to touch at all. Yellow is maybe elbows, and green is, yeah, totally high five you or hug you or handshake or something.
Which maybe should have existed all along.
You think so? Yeah.
It's
You
like,
think so?
that might be a nice little thing to say.
Yeah.
That is as far as we're getting.
Well, and it's funny because the other thing the pandemic created is an opportunity to actually think and take a step back. And I think, as social injustice is at a forefront every day for us now, which it's always been a thing, um, we've been able to focus on it more. And now we're able to focus on more diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what does that look like with our events? How does that impact our events virtually and in person? And to your point, Liz, like, not everyone wants to touch. Maybe not everyone's comfortable with that. You have your introverts, you have your extroverts, people that are different cultures and backgrounds that not everybody shakes hands. Not everybody, is a hugger for a variety of reasons, or they might have some trauma associated to being touched and you don't know that. So it's, that's, I would say one of the positive things is that we have somewhat space. I can't say complete space because we're all still really stressed out, but we have the space to think through what will in-person events look like again in person based on what we're experiencing right now, and how do we change that?
I think it's going to be exciting. I really do.
Yeah.
If somebody wanted to get in touch with you, because you're amazing, and maybe it's
I need you guys to say that.
intentional.
I'll send you your checks after.
Maybe they're an event professional who would just like to have a conversation about what you're doing. How would they get in touch with you?
LinkedIn's always best. I have all my notifications on because I probably get reached out to the most there. My work email is my first name last name @worldatwork.org. So you can always reach me there. And, as we're mentioning earlier, we're really, really connected now. I'm almost too connected now, but, and communicating with other event professionals, that's kind of my happy place. Is I know I'm not alone, and I know that, what are you doing and what are you hearing? And everyone wants, we all think that someone has that one answer of when are we going to go back to in-person events? Nobody knows.
No.
I think that's the one question we need to stop asking. Nobody knows. What are you doing in the next couple of months? What are you seeing or hearing in the next couple of months? I think is a more appropriate question, as we're just trying to, continue and figure out a way to still bring people together and, have some fun while doing it and educating people.
Well, Ceré, thank you so much for joining us here on the Webinar Talk Show today. You're doing so many amazing things, and I just know that everything that you shared today, it helps somebody. So thank you for being here.
Thank you both. I appreciate it.
I knew this was going to be great. Not surprised. We'll be back next week with more wonderful information about don't cancel your event. We'll be back on Monday and Wednesday at 11 o'clock Central Time, as always. And if you wanted to find us, where would you find us, Tom?
Gosh, they can find us in a couple places. It's webinartalkshow.com, or they can go to the Facebook page for Webinar Talk Show. We'd love it if you'd like that page, and heck, share it with your friends.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Ceré, for being with us today. This was so much fun. We'll see you next week. Until then, have a great day.